Thanks for tuning in to Tapped In. If you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed on the mats, come find your direction in our DFM Coaching BJJ School community. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to Tapped In. My name is David Figueroa Martinez of DFM Coaching, and we're going to be discussing skill stacking versus skill chasing. And to some extent, they overlap sometimes, but they are different approaches to what you should be doing. So skill chasing to me is, and I don't know if this is still existent because I teach at specific gyms. When I was a blue belt, we noticed that blue belts had a tendency to want a new answer to various problems. So they would pick up a technique. The technique would be successful for a little bit, and then people would catch on. And then they would drop the technique, go pick up a new technique or a new guard or a new way to pass or whatever. And then they would start the cycle all over again. Also, what does happen nowadays, which I know is an issue, we have so many avenues to get information and techniques that we kind of get distracted by the new flashy technique that came across our feed. So then we want to apply that, and we want to study that, and we want to put time into that. But it doesn't really fit anything that you're already doing. So, and then you're putting time into that, and then you see another technique that's very popular. The world champion just won a championship based on that, and you want to study that. And then when you look up as a blue belt, you have this plethora of techniques. They don't necessarily connect to one another. They don't necessarily play into the game that you're developing. And you become a little bit abstract, a little disconnected. You don't have a bunch of things that intertwine and work within each other. And it doesn't allow you to have meaningful growth because you're constantly building something. It stops working. Then you move to something else and you start building on that, and that stops working. It's like deciding to start a house, think that I don't like the way this house is looking. You stop building the house and you start building another part of the house. And then you get bored or distracted, and then you start building another part of the house. And nothing's actually built through. You just have a bunch of different areas that could be something, but they're not something because you haven't spent enough time on them. That is what it looks like to chase techniques. You don't get enough depth of knowledge to know whether the technique is really functional for you or not. So you're constantly in this building stage, and you're not in a development stage, which is what your training should really be about. So again, you'll see cool moves, you'll try a bunch of shit, you'll collect all this knowledge, but none of it has depth. You know a lot about a little. I should actually say it the other way. You know little about a lot. And in my stage as an instructor, I should actually do that process. I should know a lot of moves at a shallow depth, because I'm going to have students that will come to me and be like, hey, what about this? Hey, I'm thinking about studying octopus. I'm thinking about studying this leg lock. I'm not going to be a subject matter expert in all of it, but I should have a working knowledge of various positions and approaches and ways to pass. That, on my part as an instructor, is a great quality to have. As a student trying to build a game, not so great. What skill stacking actually is going to look like is moves that are very similar to one another. Move trees and move set trees that have depth based on common responses. Like you might have the same entry. For example, if we're talking, I love ankle picks. So let's say I'm going for this ankle pick. I have my hand on your collar or behind your neck, and my first set is to ankle pick on my left. I have it. And then you start being aware, so you become more sensitive, and you start pulling the leg back. What's my next option? Okay, I'm going to ankle pick the remaining leg. The movement and entry is the exact same. Now I'm just turning my focus to the other leg and then adjusting the movements accordingly in order to get the takedown. Let's say I miss both legs. I now have the option of just standing, or I have the option of remaining seated and playing guard. I now pull you into my guard and start playing. Let's say I have the same grips from standing and I feint that I want to ankle pick, but I pull guard. Or I have the same grips and I'm getting the same position where I'm pulling your head down. It's the same look entry-wise. So you're waiting for the ankle pick. So maybe you bend over a little further and you're keeping the hips away a little further. So now I Yoko Tomonagi you and I plant my foot in the hip. I take you over. So the entries and the looks look very similar. But there's a depth to that position because I understand it really well and I've played it for a long time, that I have answers for the things that you're most common going to respond with. Then I have answers to things that you may not even quite be aware of. So the entry level looks the same. Controls look the same. But the depth is what really kills you, because you might be able to defend a couple of the first options. But because I've spent so much time here and I understand the route tree and I understand the evolution of the position and what you will most commonly do and not do, and that I'm ahead of the game here. I've spent so much time that I can understand it. The other way that this will look is when you start stacking techniques that work in various positions. 2-on-1. You could do 2-on-1 standing. You could do 2-on-1 if you're seated and they're standing over you. You can do 2-on-1 if you're seated and they're kneeling. You could do 2-on-1 in butterfly guard. You could do 2-on-1 in bottom half. You could do 2-on-1 on your back in closed guard. Like 2-on-1 is a powerful position. And that stackability where you can just plug and play and put it anywhere that it fits is massive. I love the 2-on-1. And there's a bunch of positions where we can do that. Kimura grip is another one. Armbar is another one. And then you can also stack things together that work in unison. So if you learn how to do arm bars, the other thing you should learn how to do really well is triangles. If you don't do triangles very well, get used to the position, because then you can start using omoplatas. And those stacked techniques are all in the same family tree and they work really well off each other. And the Kimura also does that you can develop whole games off of just knowing those 3 submissions. And it is deadly. So if you can create scenarios where the techniques, either it's the same technique regardless of position, they work really well, or if you can stack techniques together that work in unison, where I don't have to learn a whole nother sequence. This sequence here, the armbar, triangle, omoplata, Kimura, because they work so well together, I don't have to learn a bunch of other submissions. Like I can learn these and they're so beautifully balanced that I can swim in between the positions, and they defend in this, so now we're going armbar. They defend the armbar, now we're going Kimura. They defend the Kimura, now we're going omoplata. You're stacking the deck in your favor. That's what I want students to start like really considering. And the same happens with guillotine, darce, and some of the other chokes from that position. If you're someone who loves playing north-south, there's a series of techniques that work. North-south choke, bread cutter choke, or paper cutter, whatever you want to call it. North-south Kimura, triangle choke, or scissor choke, I should say. So there's a bunch of things that work in that position really well. So I don't have to learn, hey, I got this one choke from north-south. I got this one choke from closed guard. I got a one armbar from top mount. I can find the positions that I really like and develop this really healthy environment where they defend the bread cutter / paper cutter, and I switch to the armbar. They defend the paper cutter, I switch to north-south. If they are in north-south and they start to roll away, I switch to high elbow guillotine. Or they switch away, I do the rear naked choke, but from that position. and I start stacking the deck in such a way that my partner has to continue to defend one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Eventually you get them. That's what I want people to start doing. And that's what I want people to start really understanding. You do not need a bunch of unconnected shit. You need a position that you find yourself in quite often. You need to understand the position really well, control-wise. And then you start adding submissions that work in unison or in connection to, and you become one deadly motherfucker. Additionally, you want to have a couple of positions where you do that from. So again, if you're a collar choke person, for example, Hodger made the collar choke, as basic as it is, one of the deadliest submissions in the game. So if you're collar choke and you like collar choke, start collar choking people from all the positions possible. You're in bottom of half, collar choke. You're on your back in close guard, collar choke. You're in butterfly, collar choke. You're in mount, collar choke. And it's one skill set that you now can adapt to different positions. And then there's going to be responses to those. For example, if I'm in mount and I collar choke, they're going to push off potentially. I got the armbar. They might turn, I got the back. So then you start grouping things together. And again, that's when you become really difficult to handle, really difficult to deal with. It doesn't have to be super intricate. Gracie had a very simplistic but deadly game. It doesn't have to be showy. It doesn't have to require a bunch of athleticism. If you're not athletic, truncate the movement. Build on supreme controls. If you're athletic and you're fast and maybe you're the smallest person in the classroom, use your speed. Use your transition to get in and out of positions and then have deadly responses to those positions. And you'll start catching people in the in-betweens. So stop picking up random techniques on Instagram or wherever. Don't buy a bunch of instructionals. Find out what you like, what you're showing interest in and having a little bit of success in. Buy a instructional that covers that position really well and build from there. Get focused. Understand that I cannot lose my train of thought trying to pick up all these other useless things. And some techniques aren't useless per se. They're just not there for you right now. You can pick them up later. Right now, you have to work on this. Right now, you put a goal. I wanted to get really good at arm bars. So that's going to be your goal. Focus on that. If you're new to the game, your goals are going to be a lot of guard retention, escapes, frames. Build on that. Don't worry about the other stuff. Build your skill sets on that. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please hit me up, dfm.2099 on Instagram or Threads. We also have a free school community, Technique Tuesdays. I put all my recorded workshops on there for free. Again, anything I can help you with, hit me up. Until next time, thank you so much.